I was alone at the office during a storm, and discovered a dark secret that changed everything. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill gripped my spine. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as darkness spilled from the room like a thick fog. My routine had been mundane that evening, just me, the fluorescent lights buzzing, and the flicker of my computer screen. I thought I was safe from the chaos of the outside world, but then the storm hit. Heavy rain hammered against the windows, and the wind howled like a lost soul. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision. I could smell the damp air, heavy with the scent of wet concrete. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath. I darted glances at the clock. Time didn't exist in that moment of isolation. Suddenly, I heard a low creak from the hallway, like footsteps dragging through the thick carpet. My palms were sweaty, my throat dry. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep inside, I knew something was off. The air was charged with electricity. Each noise echoed, amplifying my fear. I tried to ignore it, bury myself in work, but every rustle made me jump. It was as if the office were alive, waiting, watching. Then the lights flickered. A buzz of static filled the air, and for a moment, everything went dark. My heart raced. I fumbled to find my phone, the glow my only anchor in that pitch-black void. When the lights returned, the shadows seemed darker, somehow more menacing. I could feel a presence lingering just beyond the edge of what I could see. And then it happened. An object on my desk shifted, sliding across the surface with a soft thud. I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed, and dread gripped my chest. I stood slowly, scanning the room for signs of life. My footsteps echoed in the silence. I inched toward the door where the darkness pooled. A whisper floated through the air, barely audible but unmistakable, "Let me in." My stomach dropped. I wanted to bolt, to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Panic clawed at my insides as the whisper grew louder, more insistent. What lay behind that door? I was seconds away from discovery, seconds away from the truth, but I hesitated. Would I uncover something that could change everything, or something that should stay hidden? Before I could decide, there was a loud bang, and my heart leapt into my throat. The door slammed shut. The sound sent shockwaves through me, freezing me in place. I was not alone. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The chill of fear wrapped around me as I stood paralyzed, starkly aware of the stillness that followed the sudden bang of the door. The darkness beckoned from the other side, an insidious presence that seeped into every corner of the office like ink on paper. I could hear the muted patter of rain against the windows, the distant rumble of thunder, as if the heavens themselves were protesting against the unease that gripped my heart. The fluorescent lights flickered again, casting frantic shadows across the walls. I grasped my phone tightly. The weak beam of light felt like a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. With trembling hands, I aimed the light towards the door, but it was as if the shadows were drawn toward its brilliance, absorbing the illumination rather than retreating from it. Then came the sound, a rustle, not from the door, but from deep within the room, just out of reach of the light. An anxiety-laden silence followed, punctuated only by the muted ticking of the clock, each second dragging like an eternity. It was then I noticed something chilling, an anomaly amongst the mundane, the flicker of a motion detector light at the far end of the corridor, barely visible through the haze of storm-driven gloom. Compelled by an instinct I couldn't quite understand, I crept toward the source of the light, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Each cautious step felt heavier, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. As I reached the flickering entrance to the hallway, a cold wind gusted out, wrapping around me like a sinister embrace. It carried with it a faint whisper, unrecognizable yet oddly familiar. "Come play with me," my skin crawled, and I instinctively turned back toward the office's sanctum. Yet the door, the solid, wood protection, no longer looked inviting. Its polished surface shimmered, now marred by a jagged crack, as if something had slammed against it with enough force to fracture its very being. Dread washed over me. What had I unleashed by simply stepping through that doorway? The sound of footsteps grew louder, deliberate and slow, like the methodical ticking of a countdown. My heart thundered in my chest as I squinted into the torrent of shadow. It was a noise unlike any I had ever heard, a mixture of dragging, scraping, and the unsettling squish of something wet beneath a foot. Just then, the silence split once more as the overhead lights buzzed violently and went out, plunging me back into darkness. The glow of my phone illuminated only small patches of the room, leaving the majority cloaked in obsidian. Let me in, the voice was insistent now, filled with a haunting malice that sent shudders rippling through my core. Instinct and primal fear screamed for me to flee, to escape from whatever malevolent force lay beyond, but before I could turn away, the whisper shifted, morphing into laughter, childlike and joyful yet chillingly sinister. It echoed, bouncing off the walls, twisting my stomach in knots. My heart raced, frozen in place, caught in the web of my own fright, and then I saw it. A faint outline emerged from the abyss, a figure coalescing out of the dense shadows. Its shape was indistinct, creeping forward, limbs distorted as if they belonged to something that had never walked this earth. For a moment, time suspended as I struggled to decipher whether it was real or my mind's creation birthed from terror. The entity paused, just on the threshold of my phone's light, and I caught a fleeting glimpse of eyes, black holes that seemed to swallow the very light around them. It opened its mouth, widening impossibly, revealing a void so deep that it felt like it could consume everything. As it drew closer, the air felt charged with energy, crackling against my skin. The laughter crescendoed, merging with the storm outside, creating a cacophony that spiraled, drowning me in its depths. I should have moved, should have screamed, but my body betrayed me. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the room, a jagged vein of light tearing through the dark. In that second, I saw it clearly, saw the unearthly grin splitting its face, the grotesque parody of innocence twisted into something monstrous, and as swiftly as the light came, it vanished, leaving me in darkness once again, breathless and paralyzed. Then, above the howl of the wind, I heard the most terrifying sound of all, the unmistakable click of the door. The one I had been drawn to, the one I had initially opened. It was now unlatched, swinging slowly open. The door creaked open, revealing an expanse of shadow deeper than the hallway itself. My heart stopped for an instant, suspended in a liminal space between terror and curiosity. The room as I knew it transformed, warping into a distorted shell of its former self. The edges seemed to bleed into the darkness, blurring the familiar and the grotesque. That I fought against the instinctual urge to retreat. It was as if the door beckoned me, enticing me with promises of forgotten answers lurking just beyond its threshold. My senses screamed at me to run, yet something unfathomable compelled my feet to step forward, crossing the boundary into the unknown. The stillness of the air coated my skin like ice, and I could almost hear the echoes of whispers flitting through the hallway, a cacophony of unintelligible words that seemed intent on drawing me deeper into the gloom. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, taunting me with their elusive movement. They whipped and curled, a dance of malevolent spirits mocking my every step. As the room began to close in around me, the light from my phone dimmed, casting long fingers of inky dark that reached up to caress the walls. The pulse of my heart thudded louder, fighting against the oppressive silence that sought to envelop me. I had to move, I had to escape the suffocating grasp of the unknown, but the room remained still, suffused with an ominous energy that clung to my soul. My breath hitched as I descended further down that cataclysmic corridor, compelled by the need to understand what lay ahead. Monstrous shapes danced just beyond the peripheries of my vision, but each time I turned to face them, they dissipated like smoke, leaving only the sinister laughter echoing like a taunt. And then I saw her, a figure standing unnaturally still, just ahead. It was a girl, her back to me, golden curls tumbling down her shoulders like rays of sunlight trapped in the gloom. She swayed gently, a delicate silhouette against an encroaching darkness. My stomach churned, something about her felt wrong. "Please help me," she murmured, her voice a fragile melody that cut through the thick air. I was entranced, fingers trembling as I reached toward her, desperate to help. But the closer I approached, the more her form flickered, as if she were nothing more than an illusion conjured from despair. "Where are you?" I called, tone wavering, each word bewildered by the terror that clawed at my chest. The shadows swirled around her, merging seamlessly, and in that instant, I understood she was a lure, a bait designed to draw me into the web of malevolence engulfing this place. My instinct screamed to turn back, to escape the ground I now tread, but the pull of her presence was inescapable. Suddenly, she twisted around to face me, her expression conceivable as a haunting grimace. Eyes that had once sparkled with innocence now glimmered with a haunting void that mirrored the darkness surrounding us, a reflection of the very essence of fear. "Help me, it's in here with me," she pleaded, voice trembling before morphing into something unrecognizable. The words turned to shrieks, echoes vibrating through the corridor as her frame contorted grotesquely, bones shifting as though pressed by invisible, monstrous hands. That I stumbled back, my breath quickening into shallow gasps, and just as I turned to flee, the ground beneath me suddenly trembled. The walls pulsed, the sound reverberating loudly against the hollow space, like a heartbeat seated deep within the earth. Gripping my phone, the light flickered and then extinguished completely, plunging me into an abyss where only the screams of the girl pierced through. The darkness thickened around me, and from deep within the shadows, I could hear chanting, a language foreign yet maddeningly familiar, a sing-song rhythm that echoed with the force of ancient incantations. "There's nowhere to go," came the cruel and disembodied voice from the laughing shadows. "You are ours now." The floor lurched beneath my feet, and I felt the ground give way, a rip in reality opening like a serrated wound. I jerked backward, clawing for balance, desperate to escape the encroaching maw of the abyss. But it was too late. A swirling darkness drew me in, fingers grasping at my throat, cold and insistent, pulling me toward the fraying fabric of existence. And then, as the world around me began to spin, engulfed by the chaos of shrieks and shadows, I heard something stirring just beyond the edge of the void, a deep rumble resonating through the darkness. "Let's play," it rasped, a grotesque mockery of the girl's childlike plea. That I, in the last moment of clarity, before the darkness swallowed me whole, I saw her once more, her mouth stretched into an unholy grin as she whispered, "You can join me," and then I fell into the infinite dark, wondering if I was truly alone, or if I was but a part of a sinister game played by entities of unfettered malice. I fell, spiraling through the suffocating darkness, and just when I thought I could not endure the weight of despair any longer, I landed not on the cold, hard ground, but rather onto a surface that felt disturbingly warm, almost alive. My body jolted awake, pain shooting through my limbs. Blinking, I tried to gather my thoughts, but nothing made sense. The darkness was now suffused with a dull, eerie glow, illuminating details that churned my stomach, walls lined with pulsating veins, and the air thick with a nauseating, cloying scent of decay. That I pushed myself up, eyes scanning my surroundings beneath the eerie glow. My heart raced as my gaze caught the flickering forms that danced in the shadows. They were the outlines of figures, their features obscured in the darkness, but their presence absolute. They whispered among themselves, a candle of secrets flickering in the void. Curiosity pricked at my senses, urging me to lean closer, but an overwhelming instinct held me still. This was not a place meant for the living. Suddenly, a chill descended upon the room, rippling through the air until the shadows stilled. My breath became shallow, and I felt a force pressing against my chest, an invisible hand squeezing the very essence of my resolve. The figures snapped their heads toward me in perfect synchronicity, their hollow eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. They lingered in the air, silent, motionless, yet waiting. "Welcome," rasped the voice that wasn't a voice, but a thread of thought transmitted directly into my mind. The words were laden with the syrupy sweetness of malice and beckoning. "You've come to join us, haven't you?" "Join you?" I stammered, feeling the dread sinking its claws deeper. "No. I want to leave." Laughter erupted around me, a cacophony of chilling sounds that echoed off the walls, discordant, mocking. One of the shadowy figures stepped forward, fleshless features emerging into the light. It looked like the girl, but worse, much worse. The golden curls hung like twisted vines, and her once kind eyes were now darkened and hollow, a well of despair. "Escape is an illusion, dear one. You are what we've been waiting for, she crooned, her voice a song of sorrow and temptation. Her lips parted into that unholy grin again, revealing teeth that were jagged, razor-sharp. You must play the game. As if in response to their proclamation, a sudden tremor surged through the chamber, the floors shuddering beneath my feet. A door, obscured by shadows, materialized against the far wall, a grotesque portal shrouded in swirls of darkness. It twitched and pulsated like a living thing, and I could sense the terror radiating from it, a maelstrom of energies, both inviting and forbidding. What's behind the door? I questioned, fear gripping my heart like a vice. Only the truth, came the disembodied voice, mocking yet alluring. A truth we need to be fed to satiate our endless hunger. The shadows encircled me, shoulders brushing against mine in a chilling caress, urging me towards the door. In that moment, an electrical charge surged through my body, igniting every nerve-ending fear, regret, and an inexplicable pull toward discovery clawed at my insides. You'll find out everything, the girl hissed, her voice dripping with a ghastly sweetness, but only if you dare to venture inside. That I glanced at the door again, enticed despite my instincts screeching in protest. Every step toward it felt like a betrayal of resolve, and yet, that insatiable curiosity raged inside me. But the closer I got, the more the shadows pressed in, faces contorting in anguish, mouths pooling wide with screams unbeknownst to me, cries pleading as if to warn me of dangers far beyond my comprehension. They chanted in tandem, their voices melding into a symphony of horrible anticipation. Open the door, and your true fate shall unfold. With trembling hands, I grasped the cold handle, the metal slick with a slickness that felt eerily alive. It had become more than just a door, it was a test, a challenge to my spirit. I could feel the heat of shadowy breath on my neck as the figures leaned closer. Fighting against the whirlwind of despair, I twisted the handle and pushed the door open, half convinced it would unleash something that would end my suffering and yet longing for the truth I so desperately craved. As the portal creaked inward, darkness spilled into the room, coiling around my legs as if tethering me in place. My heart thundered. What lie beyond? I whispered, just as a scream erupted from behind me, a voice so familiar it pierced my soul. No. Don't. Someone cried out, desperation lacing the words. That I spun around in horror only to face the girl once more, not twisted in malicious glee, but flashing with raw terror, her eyes wide with a warning that transcended comprehension. Run! She screamed, but the darkness surged forward. The door was yawning open, revealing a realm of depths untold, and it was hungry that I was too late. The shadows surged, swallowing the room around me, my fate sealed. In that moment, I felt the pull of despair entwining with the shadows that now lived, breathed, and demanded to be fed by the essence of my soul. As the darkness consumed everything, her scream echoed in my ear's, a final plea swallowed by the void, and then all was silent. The silence pressed down upon me with an unnatural weight, amplifying the muted sounds of my frantic heartbeat. I was engulfed, crushed by the all-consuming darkness, and, paradoxically, an uncanny calm began to settle in. My senses sharpened as if the very void had stirred to life, but in this state of acute awareness, something far worse emerged. It was no longer just darkness around me, I felt a presence, an echo of despair, swirling and coalescing, forming shapes and shadows that darted just beyond my line of sight. That I stumbled backward, trying to escape the palpable dread that clung to me like a second skin, but the shadows shifted and swelled as though spurred on by my fear. A sudden shove from behind sent me sprawling not against the alabaster walls of the office I once knew, but into an endless corridor lined with flickering lights that sputtered like dying stars. I barely registered that the door had vanished, erasing the last semblance of safety I had longed for. The taste of decay lingered, sweet and sickening, filling my mouth with the memories of what I had seen. The girl's terrified expression stuck in my mind like a thorn. Run! She had screamed, but from what? My breath quickened as I pressed forward, each step echoing like a whisper among the walls, the sound mocking and taunting my resolve. Images flashed as I walked, the faces of former co-workers twisted in agony, their mouths flapping silently like the broken wings of birds' mouths that had screamed warnings I could no longer decipher. Each fleeting glimpse threw me deeper into the recesses of terror. Did they, too, wander these cursed halls? Were they trapped like me? I turned a corner and stopped dead in my tracks. At the end of the corridor was an office marked by a single flickering light. The door hung ajar, creaking softly as the wind howled through the darkness. "It can't be happening," I murmured, a trembling whisper slipping from my lips. I recognized that office seat had once belonged to my former boss, Marcus. The memories came crashing back, late-night meetings, hushed conversations, laughter that now felt like a distant mockery. As I edged closer, the flickering grew more erratic, casting jungle shadows that seemed to dance, elongate, and merge into grotesque shapes. "Marcus," I called, my voice swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. "Is anyone there?" The door creaked further open, unleashing a suffocating plume of warmth, heavy with despair. I stepped inside, instinct pulling me deeper into the sanctuary of familiar chaos. An old oak desk lay in disarray, papers scattered like leaves blown from trees long dead, an overturned chair moaning softly in the gloom. Next to it, a faded photograph glimmered, and I reached forward to graze my fingers against its glass, me hand shaking, terrified to lift it. But when I did, a jolt of electricity shot through me. The image flashed a group of smiling faces from an office party, cheer etched across their brows, hooded under the glow of the festive lights. And there, in the center, stood Marcus, his grin radiating triumph. Yet a shadow hovered at the edge of the image, a sickening distortion, ethereal and dark, curling up from the floor beneath him. Before I could recoil, the shadow surged, morphing into the figure of Marcus as I had never known him, features twisted with agony, eyes sunken deep, glistening black pools that seemed to swallow every gleam of light. No longer a mentor, he was a specter trapped in a cycle of torment. "Help me," he rasped, and my blood ran cold. The darkness offered no solace, it was a predator, preparing to ensnare me in its web of anguish. "Marcus!" I gasped, backing away, but he stretched a skeletal hand toward me, a tremor of desperation crossing his face. "You have to understand, they're coming. The others trapped here, they feed off our fear. We must." Before he could finish, the lights flickered violently, then extinguished. In that moment of suffocating blackness, something cold seized my arm. The touch was icy slick, like water laced with despair, and I felt a force dragging me down as muffled screams echoed through the walls, merging into a haunting symphony. "Flee while you can." Came a whisper, but it was drowned out by the cacophony rising around me now, as the shadows coalesced like a storm, a slithering mass of anguish, eager to claim another victim. Fighting against the force that sought to draw me into its depths, I yanked my arm free and dashed toward the door, but time twisted cruelly. As I collided against the frame, it slammed shut with a resonating thud, the screams intensifying, drowning out all reason. Then, a voice spilled from behind, meso-familiar, yet grotesquely twisted, echoing with laughter and suffering. "It's too late. Welcome home." The door cracked open, revealing a glimpse of a world begging to devour me, and I realized there was something standing just beyond, something that had been feeding off my every fear, inching ever closer. With the weight of the impossible pressing on my chest, I turned to face the shadow, dread enveloping my very essence as the realization dawned, whatever lay behind me, and whatever fate awaited, was already part of me. And it was unyielding. Then, in that moment of realization, the lights dimmed and flickered back to life, revealing 1,000 anguished faces behind me, their mouths stretching into hollow laughs, but the darkness pushed forth, hungry, insatiable, and eerily familiar. "Your turn," it murmured, and I found myself frozen in horror, knowing I was no longer alone. What I once thought was my very essence was now the prize for their cruel game. And then, the laughter exploded. The echoes of their laughter curled around me like an insidious fog, each sound invested with a twisted familiarity that made my skin crawl. I staggered back, my eyes wide with terror as the ethereal figures pressed closer, their sunken eyes glowing with a hollow light. Each face bore a grim trace of what they'd lost, transformed into grotesque caricatures of agony and anguish. They beckoned to me, and I felt the invisible thread connecting our fates tauten, pulling me deeper into this hell constructed of despair and warped memories that I turned, desperate to escape the ravaging tide of souls that sought to claim me, but the door to Marcus' office had vanished into a wall of darkness, the hallway behind me dissolving into a void of hatred and grief. I was adrift in a desolation that knew no borders, lost in a labyrinth of despair. Suddenly, the shadows seethed and formed a new senior mural of forgotten moments and meandering regrets splashed across the walls of this dark place. Each haunting vignette replayed like a film stuck on a loop. I saw glimpses of meetings gone wrong, of harsh words exchanged, of friendships soured. And at the center of it all, the antinomy deepest fear, my shame loomed larger than life, consuming everything it touched. It grinned down at me, a whispering mockery of my choices flashing through my mind. "Look what you've done," it hissed, and the voices of my former colleagues crescendoed into a cacophony of blame, each syllable dripping with resentment. "You brought this upon us." As I stumbled back, my foot caught on something cold and wet, and I fell, sprawling onto the slick floor. Panic surged through me as I looked down to find I lay upon grasping hands clawing at the ground, seeking to pull me under. Each hand was connected to a fascia once familiar face twisted in anguish. The spectral figures writhed beneath the floor, whispering secrets filled with regret, their voices like shards of glass glimmering in the dark. "Join us," they croaked, a chorus of wretched souls mingling with my own inner torment. "We can share the burden." No. I screamed, scrambling forward, desperately clawing for anything to hold on to. My fingers skimmed across something solid, a league breath of warmth still lingering upon its surface. I jerked my head up, heart pounding, praying that perhaps, just perhaps, Marcus stood before me in some resurrection of hope. But what I found instead chilled me to the marrow. It wasn't Marcus. It was my reflection staring back at me with a face twisted in unrecognizable horror. My skin was marred, ghostly pale against the backdrop of those shadows, and my eyes had taken on the somber hues of despair I had glimpsed in my colleagues. I was melded into the fabric of their suffering, my fate inexorably tied to theirs. The darkness roared, a wave of sickly malice that surged forth, engulfing the scene before me. I felt my mind slipping, my consciousness stretching taut as if it were an elastic band about to snap. The walls trembled, vibrating with the oppressive weight of their anger, their pain. "Help us!" they cried, their voices merging into a singular urgency that gripped the core of my being. The room around me began to warp, the shadows responding to their cries and coiling like a serpent, ever closer to striking. "Only you can end this." And just as I began to comprehend the horrors before me, realizing that my own choices, my own failures had woven the very fabric of this nightmare, a sharp crack filled the air, splitting through the cacophony of despair. A ripple of light sliced through the darkness, illuminating a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the office. My eyes locked onto it, horror clawing at my throat as I recognized the silhouette, its form wrapped in a cloak of despair. It was the girl from the beginning, the girl who had screamed at me, her haunted gaze now piercing into my soul. "Run!" she screamed again, but this time there was an urgency that froze me in place. "They're coming for you." With those words, the ground beneath my feet erupted into chaos. The hands that had once desperately sought me withdrew, recoiling as the entity manifested with a shuddering roar. Suddenly, the walls shattered, splintering like bone. I could feel the cold breath of darkness at my back, creeping in with ravenous hunger. I was no longer merely observing their plight, I was the next offering. "Your past cannot save you now." The voice of the entity rippled through the air, deep and foreboding, each syllable choking the light. In that panicked moment of realization, I turned to flee, but the shadows lunged, a torrent of dark energy sweeping toward me. My breath caught, time twisted cruelly as I sensed the weight of countless eyes bearing down on me, and as I crossed the threshold into darkness, a piercing cry shattered the air, a cry that was all too familiar, echoing from somewhere deep within the suffocating gloom that I was no longer alone, and as my heart raced, I realized the figure before me was not just a messenger but the harbinger of my doom. "Join us," she whispered, and as I staggered back, a part of me knew that this was only the beginning of a horror that would drown me whole. And with that, the darkness swallowed me, pulling me into a memory that was never my own. The storm howled with a malevolent fury outside, driving the rain against the windows like a relentless tide. I was plunged into an abyss of darkness, not the comforting embrace of night, but a void that squeezed the air from my lungs. The shadows writhed, and in that moment, they felt more alive than I did. Every breath I took was heavy with the scent of decay, the air thickening as if charged with the ghosts of countless regrets. I found myself unable to scream, even as the gaping maw of the abyss yawned wider, threatening to swallow my very essence. The girl's figure faded briefly into the shadows, leaving nothing but her chilling command echoing through my mind. "Join us." I stumbled backward, feeling the uneven ground tremble beneath my weight. I threw myself against a wall, seeking to anchor myself, but the surface was slick, as if coated in a viscous layer of despair, and I slid down, heart racing. I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to block out the tidal wave of whispers rising around me. They spoke in urgent panic, each voice melding with the last a discordant melody of suffering. "You can't escape. You can't forget. We are in you." They recited my sins like a litany, each transgression echoing with a pain that felt almost familiar, an insistent knock on the door of my past that I had hoped would remain shut. The shadows twinkled with a ghastly light, morphing into the faces of my past, colleagues whose hopes I had crushed with my ignorance, friends I had neglected in my blind pursuit of success, the girl whose scream had spurred this entire descent into chaos. Each face flickered around me, their eyes hollow tapestries weaving tales of betrayal and loss. "Your fault," their voices harmonized, a symphony of gloom that threatened to drown me. "You made us this way," the entity's voice seeped through the room, chilling the air until it crackled. "They wanted to warn you, to save you. But you weren't listening now. It's too late." It was then that I felt a trembling vibration underfoot, something alive, something insatiable trapped beneath layers of darkness. It pulsed like a heartbeat, rhythmic and foreboding. I stood, feeling the thrill of terror coil tightly in my chest as I backed deeper into the shadows. In a frantic moment, my eyes scanned the pitch-black office, searching for an escape, a sanctuary from the relentless advance of despair. But the walls shifted, dwindling around me, muting my vision to phantoms darting in the corners of my sight. I dared to take a step toward the door that first led me into this limbo, but as my hand gripped the handle, the spectral laughter erupted again, louder and more sinister. "Not yet." The door shuddered violently as a gale-force wind whipped through the office, snatching at my clothing, clawing at my skin. I let go, stumbling back into the shadows. And then, from the suffocating darkness, something emerged, a figure cloaked in the features of the damned. "Do you remember this place?" It hissed from behind a jagged smile, its eyes shining with a morbid light. "This was where it all began. Where you turned your back. Where they needed you most." Each word felt like daggers plunged into my spine, sharp and persistent. I wanted to deny it, to scream that I'd changed, that I'd learned from my mistakes, but the memories surfaced, unbedements of derision, of blind ambition that had paved a path of suffering. The ground beneath quivered again, a deep throbbing echoing through the room, and suddenly, a peculiar sound pierced the shadowy atmosphere, a child's laughter. I gasped, clenching my fists to repress the rage and guilt, but the laughter persisted, fine-tuning itself into a chorus, calling to me like sirens tempting sailors to their doom. "Come play with us." I spun around, frantic, but there was no one there. The laughter grew louder, escalating to a crescendo that reverberated within my skull. I turned again, seeking the source, desperation snaking through my veins, only to come face to face with the girl. Her expression shifted from one of terror to something else, a twisted smile creeping across her ghostly visage. "Join us in eternal play," she said, her voice rising above the maddening chorus, each word dripping with sinister delight. And there, in that dread-laden moment, as the shadows began to swirl and converge like a tempest closing in on all sides, I felt the weight of countless souls pressing against my hungry, yearning for something I refused to offer. Before I could grasp what was happening, the walls shattered again, buckling under a force unseen. Splinters of light cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of the inferno below, a churning abyss of writhing souls in agony. I felt their pain, their longing clawing at the core of my being. Suddenly, with an ear-splitting roar, the ground erupted beneath me, and as I lost my footing, I was pulled down into the abyss I had so desperately tried to escape. My scream tore from my throat, echoing into the empty void, merging with the laughter that swallowed me whole. And then, just as I plunged into the depths of despair, I was yanked back with a force so fierce it left me breathless. The girl's face loomed above, her eyes wide with an intensity that stole my soul. "This isn't over," she screamed, and I was forced to confront the truth I had long denied. We were not simply victims of our own choices, we were the architects of our own unending horror, and the final act was yet to come. As I tumbled into the relentless whirlpool of darkness, the whispered promise of returns entwined within my mind, the harrowing truth left hanging, dangling over the precipice of realization, waiting for me to succumb. The laughter subsided, replaced by a chilling silence that enveloped me like a shroud. I struggled to process the disorientation of my surroundings. Was I still in the office? The shadows had turned oppressive, squeezing against me like a vice. Somewhere in that suffocating darkness, I could sense the restless energy of the tormented souls lingering around waiting, watching. As I pushed myself upright, I noticed a peculiar shimmer flickering nearby. It pulsated gently, urging me closer, a pulsating light that promised revelation. The air crackled with a foreboding charge as I approached the strange glow, cautiously reaching out, heart hammering in my chest. It resembled a child's drawing etched into the air, lines and curves twinkling with a life of their own. Remember, the voices whispered, weaving through the stillness like a melodic haunting. Remember what you lost. That I squinted into the luminescent design, and suddenly, memories spilled forth like vomit. The faces, the laughter, the betrayal, all illuminated by that spectral glow. They flickered before me, dancing around me in a macabre ballet, each step echoing sorrow and regret. The girl was there, but also others, me colleagues from the firm, the team I had so carelessly dismissed after a botched project, and friends whose eyes had turned dull with disappointment. "Leave me alone," I shouted, but my voice dissolved into the thickening fog of anguish that corralled my very existence. The image before me twisted violently, the ethereal light warping into a grotesque marionette of my failures. The figures contorted, their once familiar faces now marked with anguish, mouths opening in silent screams, pleas for absolution I couldn't grant, boiling over into a tide of despair. I staggered back, my vision blurred by tears that threatened to spill. "What do you want from me?" I cried into the ghastly void, but the answer, as always, was silence interspersed with that suffocating laughter. Before I could find an escape, the ground beneath me shifted, a tremor running through the bones of the building. With every pulse, the shadows seemed to thicken and twist, as if nurturing a hunger. I clutched at my temples, desperately trying to stave off the noise all around me. It felt as if the very walls were bleeding darkness. Suddenly, the pulsing light flared, and the room erupted with vivid Clarissa scene unfolded right before me. I stood in a different place, an office much like my own but filled with a vibrant energy. I could hear the hum of chatter, the resonant laughter harmonizing with the sound of typing. The spirit of collaboration danced in the air. But through the joy, silhouettes skulked, their features obscured in the haze of time. They turned toward me, mouths curling into sinister grins, eyes sharpening like daggers. Each once familiar figure warped into a monstrous reflection of my neglect. The shadows of potential harnessed and choked under the weight of my ambition. Far in the back, I saw the girl with her broken smile, beckoning, teasing, her laughter echoing with an unsettling clarity. "Come, see what you've built," she said, her voice a silk ribbon woven with malice. "See what they've lost because of you." With dread pooling in my stomach, I felt the gravity of my choices yank me into the vision. I stumbled through the scene, needing to confront the truth I had buried beneath denial. Each familiar face was etched in sorrow, the vibrant warmth of their smiles replaced with resignation. "A deserving fate," one of my former colleagues muttered, their voice thick with bitterness. "We trusted you." And now, my breath hitched as I attempted to pin them down, to apologize, to explain how life had turned chaotic. "I didn't mean to," I sputtered, but any attempt to voice remorse was swallowed by a tide of collective rejection. Then the room whipped into chaos. Papers flew, the air thickened with a tension so palpable it curled my fingers like a vice. The figures began to converge, shadows layering upon shadows, morphing into something else, something infinitely darker, writhing like a swarm. They lunged at me. The sounds of their cries echoing back into the past, piercing and hollow. No one can save you. They screamed, their once familiar faces twisted in echoes of despair. I backed up against the resounding wall, panic rising like bile in my throat, scrambling to find balance in this vortex of gloom. Then I realized, the suffocating whispers had returned, a familiar litany of despair, threading through my mind like an insistent melody. You can't remember. You don't want to remember. I seized my head, desperate to ward them off. No. I can't go through this again. But the shadows coiled tighter, dragging me back into that wretched scene which now morphed into a vast, echoing hallway, a corridor stretching infinitely, lined with doors marked with names I recognized. That I felt the presence behind me grow, a weight that pressed heavily into my back, a slow realization settling in. I turned around to face it, heart pounding furiously. And there she stood, the girl, gaunt and spectral, flickering like a dying flame. But her eyes were not those of an innocent child, they were unfathomable depths of betrayal. Now, let's play a game, she whispered, her smile returning, a cruel facade draped over unending darkness. And just as I opened my mouth to protest, a deafening crash echoed, the floors beneath us heaving as if trying to free itself from the weight of sins. I stumbled and fell, crashing through one of the shimmering doors, but instead of landing on solid ground, I tumbled into an abyss of swirling darkness, echoes of laughter reaching a fevered pitch as the door slammed shut behind me. All was quiet as I floated through the void, suspended between worlds, my heart pounding. But then a cold breeze brushed against my neck, and whispered softly, "You'll never leave." And in that instant, the walls around me began to pulsate wildly, breathing with a life of their own, ready to reveal their final, horrifying secret. The darkness was alive, pulses of energy coursing through it like writhing serpents. With every heartbeat, the sensation of being watched intensified, pressing in from all sides. I grasped at shadows, trying to find something solid to anchor myself, but the void offered no comfort. Around me, the echo of whispers twisted into a cacophony, a hateful symphony etched with fury and desperation. "You should have never forgotten," a voice hissed from the dark, chilling itself into my blood. It felt familiar and alien, like a long-buried truth clawing its way to the surface and demanding to be acknowledged. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice swallowed by the oppressive weight of the shadows. Panic clawed at my chest, reverberating with desperate breaths that turned jagged and raw. I focused, trying to remember the path I had taken to this hellish place. I could see hints of illumination, doors lining the edges of my vision shimmered with insistent glows, but a torrent of swirling darkness obstructed my way, threatening to consume me. Suddenly a door swung wide, light spilling forth like blood from a wound. Compelled by a primal urge, I reached for it. I could hear familiar cries of urgency, voices from the past churning with frustration and sorrow. "Don't open it," a different voice shouted, stern and full of dread. It sent shudders through my bones, but I could not resist the promise of escape. I stumbled forward, propelled by a longing for clarity. The air thickened as I crossed the threshold, losing myself in the blinding brilliant glow. The world solidified around me. I found myself in a familiar office, but it was drenched in an unsettling ambience. Desks were overturned, papers scattered like disturbed autumn leaves. The walls wept with shadows, gnarled forms creeping along the corners, pulsating to the rhythm of the storm outside. It was as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen, and then I heard a voice so sweet yet laced with something dark and sinister, echoing from the corner of the room. "Do you remember the last time you walked away?" The girl stood there, her eyes gleaming in the half-light, glinting with a predatory shine that sent chills radiating through me. "I didn't," I protested weakly, my voice trailing off as her presence loomed alluring yet terrifying. "You left us," she cooed, stepping closer. "You turned your back." Her form flickered, skinning away the facade of innocence, revealing a ghastly visage marked by an eternity of sorrow and despair. "Please," I gasped, stumbling backward, desperation flooding my senses. "You didn't mean to abandon anyone, then why does it haunt you? Why can't you move on?" With each word, her form shifted, contorting into the faces of others, colleagues, friends, each one a reflection of their disappointed hopes and dreams intertwined with their bitterness. They advanced, shadows pressing heavier against one another as if they sought to drown me beneath the weight of their memories. I admit it. You were selfish, the chorus echoed, a wave crashing over me. You watched as we fell apart. You watched us suffer. The voices twined together, synchronizing into a sinister chant that ignited my pulse. A mistake, I pleaded, grasping at the air. I made mistakes. Tears streamed down my cheeks as the shadows twisted into forms I recognized, their faces crumbling into masks of rage and betrayal. With each decision, with every regret, you chained us to this place. They hovered inches from me, closing in. I could feel their anguish hot on my skin, almost overwhelming me. Remember what we built together. As the shadows encircled tighter, a different figure broke free from the pack, a tall silhouette clad in a dark suit, face obscured. My heart froze, recognition striking me like a thunderclap. Head of the firm I had so carelessly disregarded in my climb to the top. Time to pay the price for your ambition, he intoned, voice deadened, reverberating like a funeral dirge. Come and see what awaits you at the end of this road. I gasped, the gravity of my past decisions pinning me against the wall as his empty eyes bore into mine. The spectre raised a hand, the air solidifying into a cavity, a portal swirling with dread where forgotten dreams and abject ruin melded into a landscape of despair. In that moment, I felt the walls threatening to collapse, the cacophony of voices converging upon me, demanding acknowledgement, demanding justice. No. I shouted, a final plea, but it was too late. The floor beneath me cracked open, revealing a chasm that yawned wide. Tentacles of darkness reached for me, ensnaring my limbs, dragging me closer to the abyss. I fought against it, but the weight was too heavy, and their voices, once pleading, transformed into a crescendo of accusations. Join us. Join us. You belong with us. They chanted, drowning out my cries. As I teetered on the edge, I caught sight of the girl once more, her eyes glimmering with a cruel triumph. You could have saved us, she whispered, voice thickening with satisfaction. But now, you'll never be free. And with one last pull, the shadows yanked me over the ledge, plunging me into the darkness, where nothing but the echoes of my failures awaited me. The last thing I heard was the laughter. It consumed me. And in that maddening spiral, where light was but a distant memory, I understood I was not meant to escape. I was forever entwined with the darkness I had forged. I awoke, breathless and gasping, my eyes struggling to adjust to the sterile glow of the office, yet it felt wrong, twisted. The storm raged on outside, its furious winds echoing like a strangled cry. I blinked rapidly as shadows danced near the edges of my vision, reliving the horrors I thought I had left behind, only now they whispered with veiled malice. Each flicker which I once thought merely property of my imagination spoke to me, promising sweet reprieve only to drown my spirit in dread. Faltering on unsteady legs, I pushed myself up from the floor where I collapsed, confusion settling heavily on my chest. Had it all been a dream? But the stale, acrid scent of decay still perched in the air, gnawing at my senses, and the weight of despair sat heavily upon my heart. I glanced at my phone, evidence of time both fearfully short and eternally lengthy. Several emails buzzed with urgency, a reminder of the mundane, yet pressing world I had tried to escape. Something stirred within me, an urge to flee, to abandon this place as I once had. I moved to the door, gripping the handle tightly, yet when I turned it, it pulled back with a wrenching force. Panic clawed at my insides as the shadows folded inward, mocking my attempts to escape. Time twisted, and suddenly, I was encased in darkness, the room warping into distorted shapes, memories fluttering before me like moths drawn to a flame. Did you really believe it was over? The voice slithered through the air, a guttural echo that made the hairs on my arms stand at attention. I whirled around, and there she was, the girl, her form flickering between the innocent visage I recognized and something grotesquely twisted, an unspeakable amalgamation of pain and mirth. You took the plunge into your own darkness, but you're not free yet, she cajoled, a hint of glee woven into her words. You are now one of us. Shadows swirled at her feet, curling around her like affectionate serpents. To free yourselves from this torment, you have to recognize the truth. We all trusted you to save us. You could have stopped it. Her words pierced through my gut like an icy blade, echoing against the confining walls of my recollections. No. I croaked. I didn't mean the darkness you created doesn't care about your regret, she interjected, her voice a silken thread pulling taut. It thrives on what you left behind, on who you abandoned. Are you ready to turn back? I stumbled backward, heart racing then, suddenly, the world around me theatricalized into countless scenarios of my past familiar faces abstracted into anguish. Each fleeting glimpse became clearer, abstract emotions crystallizing into tangible horrors that pinned me in place. Join us, they chorused, voices hauntingly familiar yet utterly foreign. Join the game you ignited. No. I didn't. I screamed, but my protests were lost to laughter, a chant thrumming through the shadows enveloping me. The walls pulsed in response, trembling like the breath of the sorrowed souls interminably trapped, and I felt myself grasping at memories beyond my control. Suddenly, gaping doors materialized around me, each one pulsating a vicious invitation to peer into my past regrets. Without thinking, I lurched forward, reaching for a shimmering door, but the moment I crossed the threshold, everything shifted. It wasn't clarity that awaited me, it was the embodiment of horror, a room ghosted with the echoes of every decision I'd ever made, the ramifications of my neglect rippling like stones cast upon still water. Before me laid my colleagues, each tormented face reflected disbelief and anger. You let us down, they whispered, merging their hands as shadows wrapped around twisted silhouettes of forgotten trust, twisting the truth into a bleak parody. With each agonizing step toward them, my pleas dissolved into the gaping maw of their contempt. Can you see what you've done? They wailed, voices merging like venomous currents in a blackened river. Face it, but I couldn't face it, I didn't want to own it. And just then, the shadows thickened, pouring forth, a tide of despair crashing against the walls of my mind, and their anguish transformed into a storm of collective rage. The girl stepped forward, her visage an entrancing blend of innocence and malevolence. Play with us, and we will show you. What you left will haunt you. And then it hit me, a memory wrapped in an ethereal glow. I saw my old self, the courageous, bright-eyed individual I once was, laying lifeless among a pile of my negligence. I staggered, heart clenched tight in a vice, the truth manifesting itself as a looming specter. Can you hear them? The girl continued, her tone a dark lullaby. Can you hear their whispers call for you? They're ready for another game. Suddenly, like a burst of light, I was thrust back into the office I had tried to escape. But now, every shadow felt like it had taken a form, each corner of the room thrumming with vengeful energy, blasts of forgotten recognition knocking against my heart. The room began to shake under an indescribable weight, and the whispers coalesced into a screech. 1,000 voices of the damned spiraled together, unearthing my buried thoughts. You carry us. They howled. You breathe our shared despair. I fell to my knees in horror, but as I did, the figures encircled me, morphing into all those I had left behind, living, breathing memories now twisted into terrifying specters. Let's play, they sang softly, voices tinged with the bitterness of betrayal. The girl danced lightly among them, her laughter a siren call urging them onward. No. I cried, but my voice carried none of the authority I yearned for. The shadows surged around me, curling beneath my skin, a malignant force merging with my essence. I could feel the me failures, my neglect, every single moment I had thoughtlessly snatched away, clench around my soul like a prison of my own design, and then, amidst the chaos, it dawned on me. I wasn't simply trapped in this space of torment, I had become a vessel, a living reflection of their suffering, a haunted marionette swayed by strings of despair I hadn't even noticed. They had waited for me as I learned to navigate the darkness, back and forth. In the end, I realized that I was as much a part of their world as they were of mine. As this dreadful epiphany washed over me, the shadows melded tighter, consuming my vision in a whirlpool of darkness, and the chilling laughter echoed in that suffocating void that I and the silence that followed. I could feel them, each soul, eager for connection, pieces of my fractured conscience nervously brushing against me. Welcome home, the girl murmured softly, her figure now reflecting my darkest thoughts, shadowy and contorted until there was nothing left but the shared desire for relief, the sweet, haunting promise of eternal play. join us. The last whisper curled around me as I tumbled into the abyss. Me fate sealed as I became both predator and prey, forever entangled in a game I thought I could escape, yet always returning to face. And as I spiraled away into the eternal depths, one chilling truth remained, a final thought that sliced through the anguish: sometimes the horror lingers not in death but in the endless loop of regret. It wasn't over, it had only just begun.